All right, so this is exciting. It's fun to get to meet everybody virtually as we begin our training experience together. So let's jump now into some information and develop an understanding so that it will support us in the work that we do as we move forward in the unity field healing paradigm. I'm going to take a minute or two just to tell you my story before we do that, only to add a little bit of context to the evolution of unity field healing and understand how it came into being. Now, many of you know I'm a physician, a medical doctor. I'm a specialist in diagnostic imaging and a professor at the university. But in tangent to my very traditional medical career, I've had a very long interest and practice of energy-based healing and consciousness-based healing work. And my story goes back to around the time of 1987, 88, 89. Many of you know as the harmonic convergence, which we'll take a look at. I began to have what I call today a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. Now, I wasn't really a spiritual seeker and I wasn't really looking to have mystical experiences. But what began to happen for me was I began to have these really unusual energy phenomena happen. I'd go to bed at night and I'd lay down, and all of a sudden my body would start to vibrate or shake, and I would have these surges of energy through my physical body and even in my spine. And as this happened, I really didn't know what I was living personally. It was kind of a scary experience, to be honest, because I had never encountered anything like this, and I really didn't have anybody to go to explain what I was happening that I could trust that would truly understand what it was that I was living. But I was kind of taken under the wing of spirit in retrospect, I understand. And I had this really strong intuition one day to go to a bookstore in town. And it was a bookstore that had a lot of mystical type of books and energy-based healing books and Eastern spirituality and these kinds of things. And so I get in my car and I drive off and I go to the bookstore. And as I'm standing in the bookstore, I'm a little overwhelmed thinking, how am I ever going to find really what I came here to find? And as my eyes panned over a bookshelf, there was a book that literally magnified on the bookshelf, like doubled in size, kind of the way when you pass your mouse over an icon on your computer, it gets big. And so I went over and took a look at the book, and it was called The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. And I thought, gosh, this is kind of interesting. And as I read the book, I thought it's really explaining what's happening to me. And then I was about to leave the bookstore. I thought I had found what I came for. And as I went to go to the cash register, there was another book on the shelf that started glowing as if it had light in it. And when I went over and looked at it, it was called The End Times. And it was one of Guy Carroll's very first books of channeled messages from Cryon, in which he was introducing the ascension and the concept of a massive change in human consciousness that was taking place on the planet. And as I immersed myself in the content of these two books, I can honestly say my life was never really the same. It made me realize that there's more to the story of our human experience, and there's something happening specifically now on the planet at this point in time that wasn't necessarily foreknown with 100% certainty. In other words, there was a possibility that the Earth would go into a period of what we call now ascension, but there was an equal possibility that the Earth would not be ready for that and that would not happen. So when we were born, we didn't actually know the future in fullness. There was only a possibility that we would go through an ascension process. But there were many souls who were born to be present and to go through an awakening experience when this started happening. And of course, if you're sitting in this space and participating in this training, you're definitely one of these people. And what happened for me was over the next number of years, I began learning everything I could about spirituality and energy-based healing. And I began to have experiences of seeing energy and feeling energy and having shamanic visions and these kinds of things. And then eventually, a few years ago, I started having these really conscious experiences of visions. And the visions taught me things. They would contain elements or imagery and colors, and every detail of the image was pertinent, the positioning of things and so on and so forth. And the vision would have information, and I'd have to decode the vision to understand what the communication was. And it was through a series of visions like this that I was introduced to the quantum DNA concept, and that this energy that we are moving into can be worked with in a conscious way to support healing and personal transformation. And this is what ultimately led to the development of unity field healing. So I'll go through the elements. I have some images of the visions and different kinds of things, so it'll really add context. But I just want to give you an overview so that you understand the story of the development of unity field healing. Now, over the next couple of days, we're going to take a look at many things, but we'll start this evening by looking at the principles that help us understand what energy medicine is. And so we're going to really look first at the energetic foundation of life, the principle of energy. Life is being founded in an energy paradigm. And then we're going to look more specifically at the human energy system. Then we're going to take a look at energy medicine and some principles in energy medicine to help us appreciate how it's possible to work with the tools of energy medicine to heal and to transform in different ways. We're going to take a very important look at the role of consciousness in healing and how this plays a role in energetic change. And then we're going to begin to introduce the spiritual element of healing and understand how this is also a very important aspect of the healing process. Life is not just energy. We're spiritual beings living in an energy realm. And so the spiritual aspect of the healing process has to be honored and brought into the equation, particularly when we move into quantum healing modality. And then we're going to look at DNA as a quantum molecule and begin to understand how it really represents a quantum energetic bridge to the divine. Each one of us has a soul and a higher self, but you might ask yourself, how do we access that? Or what is the communication mechanism for us to be able to reach and talk to the soul, or to be in communion with the soul? And we'll understand as we move forward that our DNA contains a quantum field, and it's through this field of energy and information that we have direct communion or connection with the spiritual element of who we are, beyond just our human being state, or beyond our humanity. We are souls, and this is a direct communication, a bridge to the divinity within us. And then we'll use that to understand the evolution of unity field healing and how the template of unity field healing came into being, and then the sessions that are part of the unity field healing process. So starting with energy, all life is energy. So since the time of Einstein, E equals mc squared, we've become very familiar with the concept that everything is based in energy. There's no such thing as solid matter that is not founded in energy. Matter is based on atoms, and atoms are really energy particles. Atoms contain protons and neutrons and electrons, and the electrons are just spinning particles around the central aspect of the atom, creating an electromagnetic particle, which is really the foundation of all matter. And atoms give rise to elements, things like oxygen and carbon and nitrogen, and these are tabled in the periodic table of the elements. I'm sure you remember this very well from your high school days. But the elements are really the building blocks. They're like the bricks upon which life is founded. So, carbon and nitrogen and oxygen will blend in different ways in different relationships and make different particles. And these particles become the building blocks or the substrate on which matter is formed. But it's not important to understand the details of all that. Really simply just the principle that all these elements are reduced to atoms, which are energetic particles. So we can even understand how that in the world which seems material and solid is still based in energy. Even though it's physical, it's still energy. Now, if that were not enough, quantum physics comes into the picture. So going back to the early 20s, science began dabbling in concepts of energy that were peculiar. And what has started to be understood is that the energetic foundation of life doesn't simply stop at the atom. There's a whole realm of energy that is internal or subatomic. And so below the level of the atom, there are fields or dimensions of energy. And it's the interaction of these energetic fields that dictate how things in atomic structure will sometimes behave or take form. And so quantum physics can be understood as subatomic, physics below the level of the atom. And so it's physics that doesn't operate with the same rules that 3D science operates. Everything above the level of the atom can be understood to be part of the physical universe. But things that are internal or interdimensional in relationship to the atom are quantum. And quantum energy is not visible. And it's for this reason that it's so mystical. Now, the day will come when we do see quantum energy. But for now, people who see quantum energy are seeing it with their third sight or their third eye. And so it's not something that is accessible to everyone, and certainly not to the technology of science, but that will change in the future. What quantum physics has started to understand that there are interdimensional forces that influence how matter behaves. And one of the major realizations that's come from this is that consciousness has a potential influence over matter. In other words, things can exist in a wave form, but they become a particle when consciousness is focused on them. And so for this reason, we begin to understand that things that show up in the material world do so because there is an organizing force of energy or consciousness that is bringing them into form and holding them into form. And this becomes a very important fact when we talk about healing, because we realize that everything that has manifest or come into being has done so through a force of consciousness, or sometimes absence of consciousness. And we'll understand how this plays a role in the picture as well. Now, to begin to understand how the world we see as outpictured forms is really based on an internal order of energy, I always like to turn to the magnet. Now, if I had a magnet in my hand, it would be a piece of metal. There'd be a north and a south pole, but we wouldn't see anything specific unless it was painted with color like red and blue. It would just be a piece of metal. But there's an electromagnetic field that's part of the magnet that we don't see. And if we put a sheet of paper over the magnet and dropped a bunch of iron filings on the paper, you would begin to see the image on the right take form. All the little particles would organize themselves into an electromagnetic field that looks like this. And so there is an invisible field of energy that exists that we don't see. And this is a great way of understanding the physical body. Your body, like the magnet, is there. But what you don't see is the organizing field of energy and influence that exists inside the body, or interdimensional to the body, that is actually what holds the body in form. And this is the etheric body, and we'll explain a little bit as we move forward how the etheric body is actually the template, the blueprint on which the physical body is built and healed in different ways. So to understand the basics of energy medicine, we'll take a look at what the energy bodies are that we possess. We tend to think of energy as something that is invisible or not seen. And we've explained that even the physical body is made of energy. But as a human being, we have more than one energy body. We're a composition of different kinds of energy bodies that have different functions. And so we'll take a look at these, the physical, the etheric, the emotional, the mental, and some of the spiritual bodies. The bodies communicate through a system or a network that involves chakras. And so there are 7 centers or domains of consciousness in the energy system that are spoken of a lot in esoteric healing. And we'll take a quick look at the chakras and understand how this ties into the picture. We're going to then turn our attention to the concept of vibrational healing and consciousness work. And we're going to look at both of these as important foundational understandings to begin to grasp how energy can be adjusted or changed or transformed, both through vibration or energy application and also through consciousness. And we'll take a look at direct energy healing work and how we can achieve that because of the principles that we explore in the above. So let's start with the energy bodies. So the physical body is pretty straightforward. Everybody has one, everybody sees it. There's not a lot of debate. You can't turn around and say, well, that person doesn't exist because they don't have a physical body. If they're there, they have one. And so the body is a very tangible thing. The etheric body is like the blueprint of the physical body. It's kind of like the energy in the magnet. Most people don't see it, but you can see it. If you put your hand against a dark background in a really dimmed room, you'll see a hazy light that seems to flood through the surface of the skin. And this is actually etheric energy that you're seeing when you do this. Or in Kirlian photography, when they cut a leaf and you still see the energy of the leaf, even though the physical structure has been taken away. This is, again, an example of the etheric energy. And the etheric energy is really the body of energy that circulates energy through the system and delivers it throughout the whole energy field of the physical body for its vitality and well-being, and also for healing. Everything we eat as a physical substance has an etheric energy. So if we eat organic food that's high in vitality and nutritious, the etheric energy that's released during the assimilation of that food is circulated in the etheric body, and it supports health and vitality. And we begin to understand how eating crappy food or energy with really poor etheric composition is a challenge for the body. It's not going to kill you, but it does weaken you. And then with weakness in the etheric system, of course, that can lead to illness. And this simple principle explains a lot about diet and how eating certain kinds of foods have a negative influence on our health and well-being. We also have an emotional body. Now, we tend to think of emotions as experiences, like I feel happy, I feel sad. But in order for us to have emotions, the reason we can do it is because there is a field of energy that is of emotional quality within our structure. And so it's kind of like a fluid energy that has the form of a body, but it goes throughout our entire being. When you feel happy, you don't just feel happy in your brain or in your heart. The happiness floods through your body. You begin to realize there's a whole field of energy that's emotional in nature, and that the way we position or influence this emotional body will have an impact on the overall energetic vitality of our whole being. If I'm always negative and hateful and angry, you can imagine the state of my emotional body and what the bleed over of that energy will be in the other bodies, in my etheric body and my physical body. And you can begin to see how emotions can shut us down or make us, the fear of certain emotional states can close us down, and we can end up becoming devitalized or restricted because of emotions. They can create blockages, and that can lead to a devitalization of the system. We also have a mental body. Now, we tend to think of our mentality as our brain. We think, and this is, a cognitive function. But the truth is, the mental capacity of our body is also a structured body in our system. And we posture ourselves in a certain mentality. And it is influenced by the way we think and the beliefs we hold. Think of someone who's really aggressive and how they posture their body. Think of someone who's very kind of loving and how they posture their body. And you can see that the way you think, as well as the way you feel, can have an influence on your physical system. And so therefore, you see when people are depressed or discouraged, they tend to close down in the heart center and they tend to be folded forward. Their head is positioned down, for example. So you begin to see the interplay or the interrelationship between the various emotional bodies and then the overall outpicturing of life that is the human experience. We also have spiritual bodies, and the spiritual bodies are quantum in their nature. And Alex Gray, who is a incredible artist, has done a whole array of paintings of various components of the human energetic system. And the reason we bring it in here is that it's not important to have an understanding of the complexity of the quantum energy field or system to be able to work with healing processes. It's simply important to understand it exists. And by understanding it exists, it means we are open to its reality. And consciousness controls things. So if we say, I don't have a soul, there is no spiritual element to my healing process, in effect, I'm shutting myself down to an influence of these parts of the energy system. If I realize I am a spiritual being and I do have components of energy that can affect my well-being in positive ways, then I open my mind and hence my system through consciousness to accessing these. So it's kind of a funny paradox. If I don't believe I have this kind of help available to me, I don't. And if I do, I do. So everybody's going to prove they're right in the end. So what's important to understand is just open your mind. Don't worry about understanding it or having the details. In fact, that can get in the way because it gets so complex and we only have partial understanding of quantum influence. But when you know you're a soul, you carry energy bodies that can have a very positive influence on your other bodies, your mental body, your emotional body, your physical body, your etheric body. And you can have an influence that promotes healing and release and opening and restoration. Then you begin to understand how you can have a top-down influence in healing. And the spiritual part of us is the part that knows how to do this. Healing in so many ways is a restoration to the divine internal perfection that already exists. So when we grasp that, we realize healing is really getting out of the way, getting energies out of the way that stop that expression within us as human beings. And so a lot of it is a restoration process. And it's hard to restore if we don't have this master spiritual energy that knows how to do the restoration for us. So here I've kind of put all the pictures up one beside the other. But in truth, what happens is they all coexist in the same space. So you don't see your physical body, your etheric body, your emotional body. You see your physical body and an energy field. And we call this energy field the aura. And the aura is often thought, people will sometimes say, what color is your aura? The truth is your aura will change its color depending on its vibrational state. So if you have a mother who just gave birth to a newborn child, her aura is going to be splendid. If you have someone who's just had an argument with their spouse, their aura is going to be less splendid. So the vibration, the color, the quality, the vitality, etc., will all be affected by many things. So your aura isn't only one color, it will change color depending on the energy composition. And all of these fields overlap. They coexist in the same space. So it's the physical, the etheric, the emotional, and the mental are all in the same space, and they influence each other, kind of the way a Wi-Fi system in your house might talk to your computer. Each one can communicate with the other level of energy in a direct way. Now, the chakras is another element of the energy system, and we see them in the spiritual body here on the left. And the chakra is a Sanskrit word that means a wheel of light. Chakras are not physical entities. They are consciousness and energy domains. They're quantum and interdimensional. If you do an autopsy, you are not going to find the chakras in the body. They don't really exist in the physical world. There are glands in the bodies that correspond to the chakras, the thymus, the thyroid, the pancreas, etc. But the actual chakras are quantum structures. They are interdimensional. They're crystalline in their nature. But you feel your chakras, even though you don't see them. So, for example, if you've ever had butterflies in your stomach, you're feeling an excited solar plexus chakra. If you've ever encountered someone and fallen in love, you feel your heart center, your heart chakra. If you feel you have a frog in your throat or you're trying to say something, but you're afraid to say it and you can't get the words out, you're feeling a restriction in your throat chakra. A divine illumination, your crown chakra. You're feeling afraid and you want to run away. You're pulling up your root chakra. You can see how the chakras have correlations with states of consciousness and with physical experiences. The chakras can receive, transduce, and transmit energy. So they're portals for the reception and interchange of energy. The way you feel may affect the way you think. The way you think may affect the way you act. The way you act may affect the way you feel. The way you feel may affect the way you think. And so one body can communicate or interchange energy through the system of the chakra network. And so in understanding that, you would think, okay, it's like a system, a relay system, or a place where energy is exchanged. But it's more than that, because through the chakra system and the expanded spiritual system of energy, we can also receive energy from other dimensions. So through the chakra system, we can receive higher level energy, or we can have communication in the form of channeling to higher vibrational realities. We also feel ourselves connected to the earth, and we can love the earth and send energy to the earth and receive energy from nature and the earth through our energy system and through the chakras. So you begin to see that they're portals for transduction of energy and the reception and transmission of energy. Through the chakras, we can also develop relationships with other people's chakras. So you can have a heart-to-heart connection with someone. In a more negative way, we can try to control them or influence them through bands or bridges that we develop between our chakra system for friends and family members and so on and so forth. So we have to learn how to clean up our energy system in this way. And a lot of energy-based healing is supporting this kind of energetic restructuring or release. This is just a summary of the 7 major chakras in the body. They all have names that are Hindu or other languages, but for simplicity in English, we have the crown, the third eye, the throat chakra, the heart, the solar plexus, the sacral chakra, and the root chakra. And you can see they're depicted in colors, which are colors of a descending vibration of the rainbow. So red is the lowest vibration and purple is the highest vibration. That doesn't mean bad or good. It's a spectrum. And so the human experience is an array of different energetic vibrations that form a composition that should sing like an instrument in tune. However, if the energies are out of balance for one reason or another, it can affect the flow of energy in the system. And we have to use energy tools and consciousness to restore the flow of energy in the system. And that, in essence, is really what energy healing is really all about. To be practical about it, if you've been heartbroken and your heart chakra is closed, it's hard to feel healthy and aligned and connected. So part of healing is the grieving process that allows the heart to heal and open again. If I've been disempowered by some terrible negative experience, you can see how forgiveness and release in different ways may be part of my own healing journey or re-expansion so that I can feel a sense of vitality and connectedness once again. So I'm simplifying things, with these broad stroke statements, but it's to understand the communication or the connection between the energy system, states of consciousness, and the healing paradigm. In the book, Unity Field Healing, I go through a lot of this in much more detail so you can understand a lot better the nuances of how these things are all interrelated and connected. I include this picture just to show you the meridians in the body. I know many of you work with processes like tapping and acupressure and acupuncture. And when you do that, you're working with the etheric body and you're working with these points of energy that are really well established within the etheric system. And so a lot of systems of Eastern medicine work with these meridians and the flow of energy or the release of energy through nodal points within these meridians to create healing and balance within the body. And so there's a whole science, very advanced science around it. Again, very complicated and not necessarily to know, but I just want you to see how it fits into the paradigm or into the picture of energy healing. Now, when we start talking about vibrational healing, there's a few principles that are valuable to understand. So the first is just the concept of vibration and resonance. So if you have a tuning fork and you strike it, the tuning fork will be tuned to a certain frequency and it will make a sound that corresponds with the frequency. For example, the note A. So you strike the tuning fork, ding, and the tuning fork will begin to sing or ring. If you have a second tuning fork in the vicinity that you do not strike, it's just sitting there minding its own business, but it is of the same or harmonic vibration as the original tuning fork, the singing of the first tuning fork will invoke the second tuning fork to begin to sing as well. And so the second tuning fork will begin to vibrate and it will begin to emit its sound. If I muffle the first tuning fork, the second tuning fork will continue to ring. So there is a resonance transfer that takes place. An energy of a certain vibration can create a reaction in another tuning fork, and it will begin to sing or vibrate as well. Now, just apply that to energy healing principles. If you have a healer who's very balanced and evolved in their energy, and they're with somebody, they're like a tuning fork that's singing in many, many frequencies and very loud. So if you're sitting at the feet of an ascended master or a Buddha or a Christ, you can imagine the fullness of their energy signature and how they would be sending out all kinds of vibrational attributes. And a person in their presence can, in resonance, be stimulated for that part of them to awaken or sing. So in healing, you see that a person can help another person remember through the principle of resonance. And so in energy healing, when you take on the cloak of healing, you take on an energy, you bring an energy into your system of a higher or interdimensional attribute, and then you're with another person, the energy that is ringing through your body can have a resonance influence on another person. And so you'll see how this makes sense when we go into unity field healing. You'll see that as a practitioner, when you go into the sessions, you feel this field of energy come to join you. It's a very powerful, but a subtle and beautiful field of energy. And it's this field that you're holding, and it allows resonance to work through you in the practitioner work. It's this concept of resonance and vibration that is behind a lot of the vibrational tools that are used in energy-based healing. Sound, for example, is another transmission of vibration. So when you make perfected sounds, sound through tuning forks and Tibetan bowls, which contain rich arrays of harmonic sound, as they move through the energy system, they can have a healing influence on the body. Crystals emit a certain radiation, and when they're in communion with the consciousness of a human being, that vibration can be amplified, and so we can work with crystal energy in healing. Flower essences are the etheric prints of different kinds of sacred geometrical patterns found in flowers and in nature that are printed on the etheric structure of water, and then the essences can be administered or consumed by a person, and the energetic signature of the essence can have a healing influence on a human being. So you begin to understand the principle behind a lot of these tools that are used. Consciousness work is also part of healing. So we can surround ourselves with crystals and good vibrations and all those kinds of things. But if we don't do the personal work of consciousness, if we don't learn how to align our own state of mind with a healing perspective, you'll see that people stay stuck or can return to lower states of consciousness. You can help them heal, but then they immediately reform the illness or the experience. And we've all encountered that in our families and in our work, where you see someone stuck in a really negative space, and then you see them make progress and they get out of it, and then they go backwards. They kind of fall back into the patterning that brought them to that negative experience in the first place. I'm sure you've experienced it yourself in your own life in some way. We all have. But it's sometimes easier to see as a witness and see it in someone else's reality. So the work of consciousness, the work of understanding how aligning our mind and our thinking to higher vibrational realm is a really, really important factor in the healing journey. I love showing this diagram from David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force. In the book, he kind of shows the vibrational quality of certain states of being. And so if you just read them on the left, you can start at the bottom: shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride. He's measured a quantum on a quantum scale, the vibrational reality of these different states. And you can see as we move towards reason, love, peace, joy, enlightenment, the quality or the vibration or the frequency is increasing. And so there are low vibrational states of mind and there are higher vibrational states of mind. And we can become very addicted to our lower states of mind. And in fact, we can think they're important and necessary and so on. But really, a lot of that thinking is just keeping us stuck in these patterns of thinking. There comes a time in a person's healing journey where they have to become willing to let go of the forces of consciousness that are creating low-level states. So for example, if I've been brought up in an environment where I've been shamed and guilt and abused, there's a lot of healing that has to take place to let me come to terms with my own value, my own potential, my own magnificence. And so as a spiritual being, I know I have the right to those things. But as a human being, I have been programmed through thoughts and feelings into a lower state of consciousness. And so I have to move up to a place where I allow my energy system to expand. And as I move into a more expanded state of energy, then it becomes natural for me to feel neutral, self accepting, at peace with the world, able to reason and communicate in a clear headed way, to truly love another person, love nature, love things around me, and to move into that place where peace and joy are kind of the natural state of my being. And so you can see there's a journey, but it's a journey of consciousness, and this will be different for each person. A lot of this gets grouped into the teaching of love and fear. And so you can see the lower level emotions are really fear-based emotions, and the higher level emotions are really love-based emotions. So we're moving from this vibrational state of fear to a vibrational state of love in all that that means. And that's a very big topic. We could spend the whole weekend just talking about that if we wanted to. But it's really just to understand the principle here and how it is an important part of the healing journey. To see how consciousness forms matter or influences matter, I love to explain the work of Dr. Emoto. And many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with his work. What Masaru Emoto did, now he has passed over a few years ago, but while he was with us, he brought some incredible understanding to the crystalline nature of water. And just like your body has an etheric energy inside it, water also has an etheric system of energy. And the water molecules can restructure themselves at a level of the etheric order, depending on the consciousness that's working with the water. And so the way that Masaru Emoto worked with this was he would apply a force of consciousness on water, then he would flash freeze the water and look through a special microscope at the crystalline order that was present in the water molecules. And so here in these pictures, we see on the left side, the water from the Fujiwara Dam, on the left before and on the right after a Buddhist prayer ceremony. Now the water on the left, you can see it looks like a blob of energy. It's just this amorphous looking thing. It has no crystalline structure or beauty. On the right, after the prayer ceremony, you can see the water has responded by taking on this magnificent crystalline order. And it looks beautiful. There's a structure, there's an array of majesty that is embedded in the water after the prayer has been invoked on the water. And this is an etheric response of the water to the influence of the prayer. Now, you can think about yourself knowing you're 65% water. So what happens if you talk to yourself like you're no good or worthless or a terrible person and so on and so forth, or you're judging yourself or condemning yourself? You're actually speaking to your water by these thoughts and by these words. Words and thoughts function in a similar way. And so the water in your body is responding to the tone you're setting by your words and thoughts. So you begin to see how your consciousness, the state in which you hold your mind all the time, has an influence on the vitality or crystalline order of the water in your body. It's just an extension of the same principle. So on the lower left corner, we can see wisdom on the left and truth on the right. And again, they're different. Each one is different, but the crystalline order, the beauty, the majesty that comes from these concepts as they're applied to the force of water through the etheric print is really incredible. On the lower right, we have emerald, which is a crystal, and pine, which is a tree or an element of nature. And again, you can see different but beautiful. And you begin to understand that different things will print water in different ways. Different flowers will print the water in different ways. And so we can use flower essences, we can use homeopathy on the basis of this understanding to create water which has a medicinal effect. If you bless your water, if you put crystals in your water, if you hold your water in high vibration and then you drink your water, it may seem a little magical thinking, but the truth is it has a very positive influence on your well-being. Going above, we see the song John Lennon Imagine was played to the water, and this was the crystalline response to the song. Again, very, very beautiful. And then beside it, we have heavy metal music. And you might look at this and say, oh my gosh, I can just feel the energy in that. And you can see it's destructuring. It's like this shattering force of energy through the crystalline order in the water. The water is smashed. But there comes a time in healing where things have to be smashed. And so you have to break down old patterns of crystalline form in order to give yourself the foundation to build something new. You can't build a castle on the sand, it'll wash away. And so there's often a destructuring that has to take place. Now, if we apply this in a systematic societal way, you can see we went from an era of the white picket fence, the perfect family full of lies and all kinds of fake things, and the heavy metal music comes through and shatters that society into a million pieces, and then something new can begin to form. So they're just metaphoric expressions to understand the influence of certain energy. I remember the first time I ever went to a Buddhist prayer ceremony, and the monks began to play this music at the beginning. And I was so sensitive to it that I felt like I was being shattered into 1,000 pieces. And I remember sitting there thinking, I can't stand this, I have to go. But I kind of made myself sit through it thinking, okay, it has to get better. And then what happened was the music evolved into this beautiful melody. And again, it was hard to capture it with the ear with any meaning, but I could feel the vibration that they were weaving with these sounds into an order. And I realized what was happening in this ceremony is they were breaking down energy and then using music to help a person reformat their energy in a more coherent and musical way. And you can see how there would be a tremendous force of healing influence that could be accessed if this was done with a lot of understanding and wisdom. And so it was a beautiful example of the power of the destructuring and the restructuring that can then take place. And then on the top right, we have the beautiful love and gratitude. It's like a brooch of majesty. And you can really feel from this crystalline picture the emanation. You can see how this embodies the vibration of love and gratitude, and it's radiating it from its form. So as we speak to ourselves, as we learn to adjust our consciousness, the way we think, the way we speak to ourselves, the way we speak to each other, you begin to see the powerful influence of these things on our physical health, our vitality, and ultimately our ability to be well or to be ill. Direct energy healing work is another way of working with energy where there's a transmission of energy. And so when we do Reiki, for example, if someone is attuned to the Reiki healing frequencies and you're using Reiki energy, part of it is a transmission of energy. You're sending energy through your system and allowing it to be delivered to the energy system of another person. So it's a direct transfer of unqualified energy. And so the energy can be sent in this way. So we can use energy and our access to healing energy to deliver energy to another system. We have to be at a point of consciousness where we understand it's not our own energy that we're sending. When we work with energy, we are part of a galactic, universal, cosmic system, however you want to understand it. And you are connected to this field, this network of energy. And when you bring yourself forward to help another person heal, this energy can move through you. This was really, really well explained in the teachings of Christ. Christ never said, I am a magnificent healer and I'm going to send you my energy to help you heal. What he understood was he's part of the universal field of energy, and standing with you has access to that to deliver to you whatever you need for your healing and well-being. So he was a conduit of energy. And it's really important to grasp that, because you don't want to send your energy to help another person heal and devitalize yourself and become sick in the process. There's a malalignment of consciousness there that makes it a bad experience, shall we say. However, if you understand the truth of it, that you are really just a vector, a vessel, a participant, a servant of spiritual energy, you are putting yourself in a position to allow the energy to move through you, then it's not your energy that is sent, it is universal energy. And it's really, really, really important to understand that. Healing is a restoring of the energetic alignment in our energy system so that we can outpicture a greater expression of health, balance, and spiritual integrity. As a human being, healing can involve any one of the bodies that we talk about. And it can involve the care of any of the bodies that we talk about. If in my physical body, I never do exercise and I never do anything physical and I underuse it, that is not good for the physical body. The physical body and the etheric body needs movement, it needs motion. If I exercise so much that I devitalize my energy by my overuse of it, then that is also out of balance. So you begin to understand that everything needs to be understood with wisdom, and that balance is the ultimate key. In diet, we need to eat, but not too much and not too little. If we eat something that's not super good for us, it's not the end of the world as long as we don't do it every day. If you exercise and you don't overdo it or underdo it, your body will benefit from that vitality that is created through the motion. If you have personal habits that you know are challenging to your health or well-being, smoking, drugs, these kinds of things, then part of healing will become a letting go of these things as well, because they do have an influence. Healing can also involve the psycho-emotional aspect of who we are. We can all have ingrained, embedded behaviors, belief systems, attitudes, programs that make it really, really impossible to heal until we encounter that and let it go. So for example, if I've been taught from the time I'm 2 that I'm useless and no good, it's really hard for someone to say that's not true. You're a very valuable human being, and have the person believe it. Because all those voices, all that program, all that energy is still in their system. And until you can clear those belief systems or encounter them and challenge them and dismantle them, it's hard to move through the influence of that kind of patterning. The truth is, we are all spiritual beings, and everybody has access to a force of healing if they want it. But you can't do it if you don't believe you're worth it, or you don't believe it's okay for you. So you can kind of see how beliefs and patterns of thinking can get in the way. And we all encounter these. They're different for each one of us, but we all encounter them in ourselves in some way or another as we go through our own journey of healing and ultimately through ascension. You begin to understand that all healing means growing in consciousness. We become aware of our spiritual nature. We become aware of the power of our spirit to heal. We become aware of the courage and the strength it takes to heal and change things. We become aware of love as the underlying nature of reality. And as we move into the vibration of love, we are able to accomplish greater and greater things. Love is the nature of the universe. And when we move into resonance with the truth of that, we also begin to experience that in our own journey of healing and consciousness. To help others heal, we can work with direct healing work. So the energy modalities, the tools we've talked about, anything that helps to enhance the energy system, restructure the energy fields, clear chakras, all this kind of stuff, it can all have a very positive influence on a person's expression. Consciousness can also be utilized. And this involves aligning with greater self-care and authentic responsibility. It means healing from past issues and the energy that was distorted through the experience of those issues. Developing a greater awareness of our ego and the truth. Greater understanding of our spiritual power to manifest change. And ultimately, learning to live in a space of greater and greater self-love. This is not an egoistic statement. To love oneself is to be accepting and empowered by knowing your worth, your spiritual worth. It's not about spoiling yourself or flattering yourself. It's about understanding the truth of your own divinity and letting yourself act in a way that honors you as much as anybody else. And so the act of learning to love oneself, it's often misunderstood, but everything in some way is an expression of developing a greater component of self-love. Now, as we begin to move into unity field healing, we begin to call upon all of these attributes. Every single thing that we've just talked about comes into the practice of unity field healing. We're working with resonance. We're working with a light pattern we're going to introduce to you called the Unity Field Healing Template. We work with direct transfer of energy. We work with consciousness expansion. So you can begin to see how it's important to have this foundation that I'm sharing with you to see why this energy modality can actually be effective or to help another human being. It has attributes of all of these things. But to really, before we can really jump in and really get the unity field healing picture in the whole story, we need a little more foundation. So let's take a little break right here for a few minutes. And in that time, you can refresh, you can go get some water, you can go to the washroom. Just take a little break to settle and to do anything you may need to do. So we'll carry on with the lecture and we'll move into unity field healing. Okay, so welcome back, and we'll carry on now with an understanding of some principles that introduce the new concepts of energy medicine. There's a new energy arriving on the planet, and there's new principles of energy medicine that are important to understand. Everything that I've explained before has been part of an energy understanding for quite some time. But things are changing, and it's important to understand the changes so we're not limited to the simple influence of things we've already just covered. There's an energy that is arriving on the planet, and it's making it easier to heal. And for that reason, if we align ourselves with this understanding, we can utilize it and to allow ourselves to heal quicker and to be more powerful in the healing we share with other people. And so to do that, we're going to talk about the shift that's taking place on the planet. This is a time of incredible change, and there's many reasons for it. It's actually something that is galactic in scope. It's not even something just about the Earth. But in the process of what's happening, the energy of the Earth and the energy that nourishes the Earth is being changed. And human beings are changing to align with the energy changes that are taking place on the planet. So we're going to take a look at the shift. We're going to talk about how our DNA is a quantum molecule and it is connected to the experience of this shift. We're going to take a look at the Akashic factor in healing and how other lifetimes can actually influence the process of healing in this one. And then we'll move into understanding unity field healing. This is a time of ascension. And ascension is a process that is driving a spiritual awakening of humanity forward. And it's moving us into a new paradigm of reality, an ascended civilization. Spiritual systems for many years have talked about the end times. The Mayan calendar has talked about December 2012 as the end of a time cycle and the beginning of a new time cycle. These changes happen in the context of a galactic system of flow. And so the Earth is actually part of the solar system, which is part of a galaxy, which is part of the universe. And so our solar system, our planet, the galaxy are all moving in relationship to other structures. And so every period of time that can be arranged in a certain array can be called a cycle. Now, the simple way to think about this is in our calendar, you can have a day, a week, a month. A month can be broken up into 30 or 31 days, 4 weeks or 4.2 weeks. Everything can be its own time cycle. There's 31 days, there's 4 weeks, there's 1 month. These are different frequencies of speed. However, they all can overlap, and there will be times when there'll be a convergence point in cycles. And the reason that this is such an important time on the planet is it represents a convergence of the Earth in the solar system and in the galaxy in a very profound way, something that only happens every 26,000 years. And this point of nexus is the time when the Earth goes from one energy field into another energy field. And so we're moving into a cycle of a different energy. And this is why it's so important to understand this concept. Because the Earth is moving into a new energy, the energy structure of the Earth is being changed. The electromagnetic grid is being adjusted to allow the Earth to begin to receive a different kind of vibrational light and energy. The work of Cryon, an entity channeled by Lee Carroll, explains this really well. And he said he arrived in 1987 to begin the restructuring of the electromagnetic grid of the Earth, to begin to prepare it to move into a new time cycle beginning in 2012. And so the planet is being poised to receive an energy which is different. And this is striking a tone or a note to begin a new kind of a civilization. In the Mayan calendar, it was talked about a time of moving from duality into unity, unity consciousness, humanity understanding its oneness with itself and its oneness in its relationship to the planet. We're all part of one ecosystem, and what we do has influence on other things. And so we're moving into a place where we're beginning to apply that wisdom and those principles in the decisions we make around life, around commerce, around reality in different ways. And there's a challenge because we're moving from an old energy paradigm, which is very different, into a new energy paradigm. And there's a tremendous amount of friction, a back and forth, an ebb and flow between the two systems in order to move forward into the new process. But the energy is biased to evolution. So we are going to move forward. It can happen really quick, it can happen really slow, but it's going to happen. And it will happen easier if we align ourselves with the transition and the change, if we understand what's taking place. And so that's why it's important to have this really big umbrella cosmic overview of what's happening. And then we'll peter it down to an understanding of how it affects us collectively and individually, and right down to the level of healing and transformation within our own human system. So this is just an example of time cycles. So you can see here how there are various oscillations in these colored lines, these waves. And you might have one big arc and many little arcs. And these could be minutes, hours, days, weeks, different frames of time. But every once in a while, there'll be a point of nexus where all the cycles converge at the same time. Imagine it's Saturday evening, December 31st, 1999, and the clock is about to strike midnight. At midnight, we're ending a year, we're ending a week, we're ending a day, we're ending an hour, we're ending a decade, we're ending a century. All these different frames of cycle all converge at the same moment in time. On a big scale, the Earth moves through a 26,000-year cycle where its alignment to the true north will rotate. And the north axis will rotate through something we're very familiar with through the star system of the constellations. And so we are going into the time of Aquarius. And Aquarius is kind of the frame of the next cycle. It's the next 2,000-year cycle. But this is only part of a much bigger cycle as we move forward into this new energy. And so we're not just going into a new 2,000-year time cycle, we're actually going into a full-on new 26,000-year time cycle. And so that's why it's in human consciousness to represent the end times, because we're aware on a often subconscious level that this is the end of an old way and the beginning of a new way. And I don't think I have to convince any of you that that's happening if you look at the news. December of 2012 was really the mid-time point. When we're talking galactic time, you can't really say it's a day, but the truth is there's a midpoint. And so December 2012 was really the apex, the point of transition from the old time into the new. And this was prophesied by the Mayans and the Mayan calendar and many other spiritual systems or traditions that talked about the end times in different ways. But the end of a cycle is not the end of reality. It's the end of a cycle, but the beginning of a new one. And so we're moving into a new cycle, a transitioned cycle, something different than what we're leaving behind and undiscovered in many ways at this point. So we're moving into a very different kind of energy, and it will fundamentally change the nature of human consciousness. And part of that will be a blending from duality to unity. We will understand the unified nature of reality, that we are a planet and a people who are one process, and that our planet is part of a solar system of which we are a part, which is part of a galaxy of which we are a part. And we are going to move into greater and greater alignment with this unified principle as we move forward in time. To understand the alignment, the north pointing axis of the equinox, the North Pole on the planet, you can see it's moving through the galaxy. So this was 3000 BC, 1500 BC, 2012. And the north point of the galaxy at that time was geared to point towards the center of the Milky Way galaxy, which is our galactic center. And so a time cycle takes us out, back and forth, 26,000 years. And we're at the midpoint where we're about to begin a new time cycle. And so it's an evolutionary vortex. We're going to go through the experience of going up an octave in consciousness and energy. It's a simple way of thinking about it. To do this, Cryan has spoken to us about the changes in the electromagnetic grid. And he explained that in 1987, he arrived to work on this grid and to prepare it to begin to receive energy that would begin to arrive shortly in the future. And so the electromagnetic structure of the Earth was adjusted in such a way to allow it to develop and become positioned to begin receiving energy. Our Earth is fed energy from the sun. The sun radiates energy, and our Earth has an electromagnetic field which controls the assimilation of the energy into the planet. The energy in the electromagnetic field, it can't bombard the Earth. This is a shield of energy that protects it. But the energy flows around it and it comes back and then is cycled into the Earth. When we see the aurora borealis, what we're seeing is the energy integration through the electromagnetic axis of the planet. And so that energy is fed into the Earth system through this mechanism. So you can see why the electromagnetic posture is so important in how the Earth receives and assimilates energy. Our sun also receives its energy from other stars. And so we can go back to Sirius, to other star systems, the suns behind the suns, if you will. And so that we are fed in energy and information in a step-down format that allows us to integrate the process in a safe way. The electromagnetic grid has been restructured and finished to prepare it for the new system. Since 2012, Cryan has been talking to us about the crystalline grid and the Gaia grid. And he's explained to us that the crystalline grid is a grid of conscious memory. It's like a memory storehouse that's part of the Earth's structure, and that it contains nodes and nulls that were being opened and activated since 2012. And there are 12 pairs of these nodes and nulls, and at this point in time, since December of 2019, they have all been turned on. And the way we can think about the nodes and the nulls is they're like a push-pull or a pump of energy. They can pull energy from the system in and push it out. It's kind of like a digestion or a processing of energy. And it comes online to clear up the energy system. It's going to actually pull in the negative energy and the crappy energy that would create a low vibration and begin to pump it out for transformation and allow the Earth to step into a place of a different vibrational reality. So this system of support will accelerate evolution. It will actually move us forward in a quantum way much faster than we would on our own simple activity. So this was put into place by the Pleiadians, a whole other story, but it was put in case we arrive successfully at this point to go through the ascension journey. And we did, and it's now active, and it's beginning to push us forward in a quantum way into a new paradigm. Klein also speaks of the Gaia grid, the energy and the consciousness that's part of the earth herself, the sacred elements, and all that is nature, and how these energy and forces, we can learn to work with them in harmony and in a balanced way. And so we begin to work with the earth and with the earth energies of healing and things that are part of indigenous traditions for a very long time, because they carry this ancient sacred knowledge forward from a time in the past when it was first taught. And so all of this wisdom is awakening, and it's also part of what we are integrating and experiencing as we move forward. While all of these changes are taking place on the earth, it's not limited to the earth. There's also changes taking place to the human beings on the earth. And so the way that the energy changes in us is through the DNA field. There is a field of energy and information that's part of our DNA system. It's quantum, so it's not seen with our technology or by the vision of most people. There are some people who are beginning to have quantum sight and quantum vision, who are seeing things. But the energy per se is interdimensional, and it's not really something we're used to considering or working with for sure. But this quantum field has been there all along. As we go through this ascension journey, this field is expanding, and we're going to talk a little bit about the mechanism of how that's taking place. And we can see that there's a spiritual DNA system, a quantum field of information that emanates from the spiritual level of reality. And it's through this field of energy that we're actually going to be working when we do unity field healing work. And that's what your initiations and attunements are all about. Now, before we jump into the quantum part of things, let's just take a look at the physical part of things. So as a human being, every one of us began as an egg fertilized by a little sperm. Every cell in your body today has come from this original fertilization. The very first egg that was the beginning of you was a single cell. And that cell contained chromosomes. 23 from the father and 23 from the mother to make 23 pairs of chromosomes. And these chromosomes are the genes which govern your genetic reality. So every gene in your body is a gene that came from this original inception, unless you've had other genetic material interposed. But for the most part, the genes in your body are the genes that you were born with. This little cell has in it, it's like a seed, it has in it the potential to become the mighty tree. Within that little tiny cell, somehow there's a magic that knows how to build the human body, that has the ability to think and to feel and have all the cognitive functions and experiences and intelligence and spiritual connectivity that is the adult human being. And you can't ever convince me that that happens randomly. There's obviously a field of information that governs that development and that process. And that's when we begin to understand the quantum energy, the quantum DNA, the field of energy and information that's part of the DNA system. Now, this little picture kind of shows what happens when the egg is fertilized. The cells begin to divide and they begin to form a little blastocele. And then the cells begin to specialize and they begin to build a human being's nervous system and bone and muscle and all of the other things that are part of being a human being. And I love the parallel to the sacred geometry on the left of this image. You can kind of see how there's a mirroring between these geometrical principles and the development of life. And this pattern here is called the flower of life, the seed of life, the vesica piscis, and so on. So these are understood to be geometrical patterns that are part of the foundational matrix of the building of life. Sacred geometry is the order inside us. It is the principles of forces that allow form to take shape from a quantum world into a physical world. And you can see it mirrored beautifully here in the development of a little blastocele. This field of information that's part of the DNA is becoming more familiar. We call it the quantum DNA, or the field of energy and information around the DNA. And so it's not just a structural or a physical egg and a sperm, it's an egg and a sperm and a whole field of information. And they form a composite or composition. And it's pictured here in an image way where we see a field of energy and information around the DNA. And this is important to understand because we're going to be going into this field to work in the way we're going to work with unity field healing. As the earth goes through this process of ascension, human beings are also being called to go through a process of ascension. And so what's happening is humanity is moving forward into what we will term an ascended civilization, a peace-founded reality that will grow into a very mature ascended spiritual system. And so in the immediate time frame, it's happening in two ways. There are some human beings who were born into the old energy paradigm who are living through an ascension journey. We could say it's in vivo or happening within a closed system. These are the souls, mostly old souls like you, who are called to go through a living upshift in their DNA. When you were born, your DNA was programmed to work in an old reality. You are now going through the process of having it programmed to exist in a new reality. It's also happening through the children. When you look at children today, you see they're very different than children years ago. It doesn't take much to realize these kids are different. And so when you recognize that, it's because the energy system of these children is structured to support them existing or living in the new energy paradigm. It's a different consciousness paradigm. It's a system where people work in groups and in collective understanding. It's a system where inherent worth of a being is understood. So we see all kinds of attributes of these children that don't fit well in the old system. You can't tell them how to be. You can only invite them to be a certain way and honor their choice. If you try to control them, they rebel because they will not allow themselves to be controlled in the same way. These are all attributes of the shift in energy that will support reality in the new realm. So you can kind of see that humanity is preparing itself for this transition. And of course, this is not without challenge because these kids are in school systems that are designed for an old reality and so on. And then things have to change. Now, as these kids get older and become teachers, they will become part of the transformation. They will be what brings the education system and so on into the new time. As our DNA is going through this, it's going through an upshift. And so part of this is letting go of the old consciousness pattern, the world that's involuting, and integrating an energy and a consciousness of a new world, the world that is emerging. So we're a bridge, we're passing through a nexus of time where we have to let go of the old and embrace the new. And part of this is related to consciousness. The things that work in the old energy are not the things that work in the new energy. For example, the old energy is all about lists and achievements. The new energy is about listening to the intuition of your soul that will guide you as a force of consciousness. And following it will lead you to synchronicities that allow you to discover what your soul wants you to discover. It's very different frame of consciousness when you stop and just look at that simple example. People say, well, is there really a quantum field of energy and information around DNA? And because we can't see quantum energy, you can doubt that it's true. So science has, however, evolved to a point where we can see the consequences of the truth that there's a quantum field of energy. And so just to bring a little science into the picture, I'm going to go quickly through two experiments that kind of show us how this works. Luc Montagnier is a scientist who was given the Nobel Prize. He shared the Nobel Prize in medicine for establishing that the HIV virus was the cause of AIDS syndrome. And so he's obviously a very reputable, well-established scientific person. And in his experiments, he did a study where he showed that DNA can encode electromagnetic imprints of itself into a distant fluid, and that the enzymes that make DNA can be introduced to the fluid, And the water that has been printed by the DNA encodement can begin to make DNA without any DNA being present. So let's go back to the water printing story of Dr. Emoto. Imagine you take DNA and put it in water, and the etheric energy of the water organizes itself to that DNA structure. Then you can bring in all of the substrates, the various nucleotide bases, and the enzymes that know how to produce DNA and put them in the water. And what's interesting is when he did this, he discovered that at a very certain frequency, around 7 hertz, which is a specific frequency on the planet near the Schumann resonance, or the old Schumann resonance, and at that frequency, the tube of water that had the DNA printed in it would produce water if you put in all the material for a polymerase chain reaction process to occur. And this is an enzyme that's used to make copies of genetic material in scientific experiments. And so he realized that gene fragments would be recovered from both test tubes, even though there was no actual parent DNA in the water, only the print of the DNA in the water. Now, this could never happen unless there was a transfer of energy and information from the DNA to the water, which means there's a field of energy and information that's part of the DNA. So you can see how this experiment by inference demonstrates there is a quantum reality to the DNA, even though we don't see the quantum energy. In another experiment by Vladimir Poponin, who is a quantum biologist, he had photons in a vacuum and then introduced DNA particle into the vacuum. And what he observed was the photons began to organize themselves around the structure of the DNA. If the photons can respond to the physical structure of the DNA, it's because there is an electromagnetic alignment in the DNA on the photons, which are non-physical particles. The DNA was removed from the container, and it was observed that the light retained its organization in the vacuum. In other words, it stayed where the print of the DNA had put it. So what are they connected to? Why would these particles continue to hold this form? Again, you begin to see there's an energetic, an invisible energetic structure that's part of this structure that was fed by the DNA or provided by the DNA. And so again, you can see there's an energy field that we don't see. DNA in this quantum field of energy is actually a field that emanates from a spiritual system of reality. And so DNA as a physical structure responds to the field of energy around it. And this field communicates with the DNA. But the field emanates from a much higher level of reality or understanding. And so this is something we'll look into, and I'll talk to you about some visions that I was given that helped me understand this principle, and it'll help you understand it too. So because of this, there's an energy moving through the quantum space of DNA that's creating a transformation. And it's this flow of energy, this force of energy, that is driving the evolutionary change in people, and it's what has you sitting in the seat and has us having this conversation today. Within the quantum field of energy, there are layers, and Lee has done a whole book that talks about the content of the quantum DNA. It's broken up into layers of energy and information, but he says, don't think of it as layers like layers in a cake. You have to think of it as a soup. All of these energy systems are woven into one system, but we can separate them as points of understanding to understand better what we have within us, within the DNA system. I'm not going to go into the complexity of these layers right now, but we will mention the healing layer, the flame of expansion, the violet flame, the Lemurian layers, the ascension layer, and the higher self. We begin to see that all of these spiritual principles are woven in the DNA system, and that at the very top level of our being, we are connected to the God or the creator from which we emanate. And compassion and this call to divinity that is opening in humanity through the ascension is part of our DNA expansion. So it spiritualizes the process in a beautiful way. And so this is a book that Lee has written about that particular topic. What we will cover is just a survey of some of the things that are contained in the information from Cryon's teachings. He says the karma, the life lessons that a person would have, the life plan, the purpose of the incarnation, past life information, the influence of Akashic memory on the current life reality, connection to your higher self and soul, and connection with specific others or your soul family, the planet and the universe. So you can kind of see how all these things fit in, and we'll take a look at why that's important. Humans are therefore going through a potential upgrade through the DNA system, and humanity will eventually all experience this. But right now, we have the opportunity through free choice to align ourselves with this transformation. And it requires us to acknowledge the divinity we carry inside of us to do it. And as we do, there's an energy that's moving through us. It's kind of rebirthing us. It's recalibrating us. And this is where unity field healing work comes into the healing paradigm. And this is awakening an expanded energy system, an opening of the human Merkaba. And so a field of energy that we carry within us and that we live in as a human being, which has a alignment with a higher vibrational reality. And so we are embodying or integrating the Merkabic field of energy through the process of the ascension journey and the healing that this implies. In this state of energy, healing is not something you have to do, it occurs. At a certain level of vibration, there are certain energetic things that just cannot exist. So we are going through a process of an energetic rise that makes it impossible for certain kinds of illness or disease to be present in the physical form. Now, to understand the influence of the Akash, to understand the influence of the healing, I'm going to talk about a series of visions that I had. Now, as a scientist, you can imagine when I started having visions and realized there was information that I was being given or taught through these visions, I was a little unsettled. And so I had an experience of a channeling from Lee Carroll in August of 2019 when he came to Ottawa for a weekend retreat. And he gave a series of channeled messages that talked about working with the unseen. And he explained in the second of these 4 channeled messages some things that are specific to unity field healing into this work. It was a channel that Cryon gave personally to me, in which he gave me my Lemurian name from my star mother. And he gave me my name as Eli. And he said, you are remembering things through these visions that is knowledge you had when you worked in the Temple of Rejuvenation in Lemuria. And so these are quotes taken from these channels. He said, there are those who would see things. They're able to see colors and multidimensional things around them and perhaps more. It's part of a new energy of the old soul who is starting to visit and experience that which is multidimensional sight. He, referring to me, sees the multidimensional connections and the unity around these things that is so profound, and he's right. This is his second sight. It's on target. It's reasonable and practical for what will one day be discovered by science. And so the reason that this is so important is because I'm going to take you through a series of visions that explains the mechanics of incarnation and how we form this energy system as part of our DNA and how it's changing through the ascension journey. And so I'm going to first talk about the mechanics of incarnation. It's an experience that I lived while having a past life regression in 2014. And in this vision, what happened was I first went to the earth from a state of spirit in the vision to plan my next incarnation. It was an experience where it's like taking a journey in energy down to the earth to feel it out and figure out where you're going to be born, the parents you'll choose, the country you'll live in, etc. It was like a fact-finding mission. And then from this space, I went back in spirit to this energy reality that looked like I'm showing you in the picture. It was like a field of fluid energy that was structured in such a way that it looked like a courtyard. It was reminiscent of a monastery or a hotel in Europe where all the doors point towards a central courtyard. But I didn't have a body or a form. I was just there as an observer in consciousness. And while I was looking in the energy, there was a structure that descended into the middle of the courtyard. And it looked like a double-sided octahedron, like is pictured here. And it was on a double helix golden chain, like a pendant. And it sat in the middle of the courtyard. And as I looked at the doors, I knew intuitively if I went through a single door, it would be like walking into a lifetime or the memory of an incarnation. But I was told not to do that. I was told to observe the process unfolding before me. And so as I watched, what happened was the energy came out of the doors and began moving into this pyramid that had descended. And as I looked at it, I realized it was receiving energy from all these different doors, like lifetimes. And so the way that it registered in my mind is that we were composing a field of energy, a very specific field of energy with certain attributes that is related to the experiences of other incarnations. So you can imagine, for example, if you're going to be a mother and you're a nurse and have two children and you're going to learn to forgive a betrayal and different kinds of things that might be part of your spiritual plan, you can see how you would bring together certain energies or attributes or kinds of information that would support you in having that incarnation. If you're going to be a mother, you might call upon energy from another incarnation of being a mother. If you're going to be a teacher, you might do the same. If you're going to learn how to forgive a betrayal, you're going to want to have a setup where you get betrayed so that you can have the experience of forgiving it, and so on and so forth. So it's like a soup of energy that was brought together, and the energy flowed and flowed until it was done. And then all of a sudden, the crystal just took form, full of color and energy, the way you see here, made up of the energy that had been contributed by this flow. The next thing that happened was this crystal shot like it was moving through hyperspace, like the stars were going by really fast, like you see on Star Trek when the Enterprise takes off. And then it landed in a crystal, and the crystal looked like it was embedded in a stone mountain. And in Cryon's teachings, he speaks to us of the crystal cave of creation. He says there is a crystal cave on the planet where there is a crystal attuned to every soul who is, was, or will come to be part of the Earth's journey. And so when you come and go through the Earth, you move through the crystal cave of creation. And at each entry and exit, you deposit the information that is related to your sojourn. And so as you're born, this energy came to this crystal. And the next thing I was shown was the structure as if it were encasing a developing fetus. Now, if you think about a fetus, a baby, this baby is forming from the genetics of the mother and the father. The egg and the sperm fused, and this little baby starts to develop. You can think of this as the point where not only the genetics of the mother and the father are part of this development, the information that your soul wants to bring to the experience of this incarnation comes and joins the fetus. So this is where your soul merges with the developing embryo, and it brings with it the energy and the information that will govern the incarnation or govern your life. And so you can see how it all weaves together in a really magical way. And the next thing I was shown was this big cosmic molecule, like galactic in size. It was this big strand of DNA. But as I looked carefully at the DNA, I could see there was like a human form at each turn of the DNA. And one of them was illuminated. And the other ones looked like negative prints. So remember in the days of photography, before digital photography, you'd have a negative and you expose the negative to light, and then the form would take form of a picture. And the picture was present in the negative, but you couldn't recognize it in the negative. And what I understood these to be were, it's like a metaphoric image explaining that within this DNA, energy and information related to the lifetime you are living and all the lifetimes that you are unaware of is present in this quantum DNA molecule. But this is the active one that is alive at this time or present at this time. The next thing I was shown was a crystalline staircase, and it was made of like a translucent light that was white and gold. And it first appeared, and I went to go up the stairs, and there was like something blocking me, as if to say, you can't go up this by physical will or intent. And it refreshed, and when it came back, there was this strand lying on the staircase that looked like this. And when I look at this, I recognize the 12-strand DNA complex. And so what it was saying to me was, you're being invited to come up to a new level of reality. But the way you come up to this reality is through a stepwise rise in the energy of your quantum DNA system. And so you will emerge into a new reality as your DNA is adjusted through this process. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. Then I was shown again this pyramid. And when I saw the pyramid this time, the little chain or the double helix began vibrating, and energy began flushing down through the structure and into the pyramid. And what I realized I was being shown in this description or this image or teaching was, in the old energy system, when you were born, you put together a life, you put your energy in your soul's octahedron, you came down and had an incarnation. When it was done, you passed and your soul returned to the interdimensional realm. You passed through your crystal each time. While you were born, you didn't tend to receive new energy and new information. It was a system of karma. And so you kept coming and going, working the energy to evolve. Because we've crossed the threshold of ascension, the system is changing. And while you're present in this human form, you are being given or introduced to energy that is part of your greater spiritual system, but to which you did not have access before the ascension began to happen. And so it's another hallmark of what is different in this time. And so the quantumness of our DNA is being reconnected or recalibrated to our galactic origin, to our greater spiritual reality. And so because of this, we are having experiences that are mystical. So people are remembering past lives. There's a great interest in past lives. People are remembering their spiritual origin. People are becoming interested in ascension and so on. And all of this is part of the influx of energy, the awakening that is taking place on the planet. So as we go through this shift, we can drop karma. In other words, the energy you brought with you at the beginning of your incarnation doesn't necessarily have to influence the rest of your incarnation. You're being called to open, to receive an energy that allows you to experience the reprogramming into a higher dimensional human, a new human. And that means letting go of the energy of karma, letting go of the influences within your akash that would drive your energy one way or another. And so as we go through this, we are allowing our DNA to reformat. It's opening us up to a greater access to a full spiritual system where we have memory of past lives. We have memory of the emotions of those past lives, but we learn to heal the print of those fears and memories on the influence of our current reality. We become aware of future potential or future lives, and we begin to align our energy with moving in that orientation. And we can see that through this access, we can bring things into our system that we didn't have before. Talents and abilities, a healed state of body, things that we had in other lifetimes, but may not have been present in this lifetime. We can learn to align our energy based on the fullness of our experience through many, many incarnations and through our spiritual origin. And this is really what unity field healing is all about. Now, unity field healing began through a series of visions that kind of taught me step by step about working in this DNA system. And so the very first step in the development of this work happened for me many, many years ago when I lived what I call a personal DNA activation. And what was happening in this experience was I was in meditation and there was like a beam of light came down, or a dot of light, and it plugged into my crown chakra. And as it did this, it vibrated and it popped open to reveal itself to be a double helix. And it was just full of white starlight, and that was all there was to it. And after it was done, I had no idea what I had lived or why it happened, but I remember registering something really important just happened. And so I kind of wrote it down and remembered it for the days ahead. In November of 2011, I was introduced to the Unity Field template. And the way this happened was, again, I was in a meditation in Arkansas on the crystal field of Mount Ida. And in the meditation, in my mind's eye, I saw a dot of light that came down. And the light opened to create a shell of light that looked like a four-sided pyramid. And then another dot of light came and made a second pyramid, and then a third pyramid. And then through the structure of the three pyramids, another dot came down and formed into a circle. And then the circle developed two smaller circles and then two smaller circles until it looked like this structure you see here on the right side. Now, although it's pictured in blue and white here, the way it really looked was that the background was really dark, dark blue, like navy. And the structure was made of starlight, like a white, silvery, platinum color of light. And it had a structure to it, but it was made of light. And energy began to flush up through the structure, like it was flowing up through the structure of the system. And as it did, it began moving around all of the circles. And it moved so fast, and like kept moving faster and faster and faster. And it got so fast that, like when you watch a tire on a car, you know, as it's moving forward, you get to a point where it looks like the tire is moving backwards now. What happened in the template was the light was moving forwards and then started to also look like it was moving backwards. And within every sphere, this rotating dynamic field of light was present, looking like a yin and a yang symbol. So everywhere there was a circle turned into a living light yin and yang pattern. And so that was very interesting, but that was the end of the experience. I had no idea what I was being shown or why. A couple of days later, I was on the internet looking for something, and this picture popped up. I was not looking for crop circles, but this kind of popped up on the screen, and I knew I was being shown or confirmed something about the pattern I just saw. And so this pattern is like an expanded version of the same thing. The template I saw was really this little part of the structure, but then this was a much fuller template or patterning that was shown to me in the crop circle. And I thought, well, wow, why am I being shown this in a very synchronous kind of a way? And I realized I'm being given information that I have to learn to decode or make meaningful in some way. I went to Egypt in February following that November event. And when I came back, I was in my office and I had just done a yoga session and I was laying down relaxing, my favorite yoga pose, I say the dead man's pose. And I was lying there and all of a sudden this template from months ago came back into my mind. And it activated again the way it did the first time. But this time something was different. There was an energy that was being created by the activity in the template. And I could see these beautiful crystalline light, like purple and green and different colors of light, like I've shown here in the image. And as I was just watching this happen in my mind's eye, my body began reacting to the pattern. And I felt like a marionette. My arms would move, my legs would move, different parts of my body would move kind of involuntarily. And I realized as this pattern was active and working in this way, something was happening in my physical body. And I thought, oh, this must be like a healing pattern or something. But again, I still didn't know why I was being shown it. But it was when I first started to make the connection that it was a healing process. And I thought maybe it's just for me, like it's something I'm being shown or given that's personal to me. But in the months ahead, I began to, these are just some examples of other crop circles that began coming into my field of consciousness. And you can see how they're all related. Through the months that followed, I kind of sat with this and began to percolate the energy and the information. And I realized I was being shown something related to a healing process. But then in December of 2012, I found myself back in Arkansas at another conference. And I underwent a series of visions that consolidated this teaching. And what happened in this vision was first I was shown through my mind's eye, it's like the top of my head opened up and I could see the galaxy. It was like I was looking at the whole galaxy through the top of my head. And as I looked up towards the center of the galaxy, it was like these arms or rays of light were coming down and embracing the earth. And I felt this incredible wash of love coming from the center of the galaxy, and I could feel it palpably in my body. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's like I'm being loved by the galaxy. That's how it felt. But as I looked at the structure of what I was seeing, I realized the whole galaxy is founded on a double helix paradigm. There's two arms of light, and it creates a helix or a radiation that is just like human DNA and DNA of all living things. And so I thought, well, that's interesting. This was when I was shown this crystalline staircase with the DNA and how we move through this process of ascension through the DNA system. And then I was shown the template inside the 24th chromosome. And it moved around inside this structure. And as it moved around, it reminded me of a commercial that used to be on television where scrubbing bubbles came out of the can and they cleaned your bathroom. And this little bubble was moving around inside the DNA axis. And as it did it, there was a transformation taking place. There was an energy release, a recalibration that was taking place. And so the pattern was showing me that it's a quantum or universal pattern that knows how to work within the DNA structure to recalibrate it or to bring healing and reconnection between the 24th chromosome and the human being. And so this was when I really started to understand what the template was and what it was doing. And as I made all these connections through the visions, I began to work with the template with people in healing work. And every time I would bring this healing into sessions, people would have these really powerful and magnificent experiences, things they've never lived before, feeling energy for the first time, seeing energy for the first time, healing conditions that they were experiencing, feeling blockages open, energies releasing in their chakras and in their bodies in different ways. And so I knew that I was really on to something with this. I was being shown something that had incredible value. And so I didn't know how to bring it to life at first, but slowly I was shown to create a system of 3 sessions. And so the energy could be delivered in a patterned way by doing the sessions in sequence. Session 1 is referred to as self-attunement. Session 2 as the unity field healing template attunement. And session 3 is targeted intentional support. And so session 1 is an attunement to your own internal DNA axis. Session 2 is an attunement to the template itself, the pattern of light that I'm just demonstrating to you. And session 3, you work with intentions based on your own journey and your own experience. And you bring intentions into the session to focus on them while you're doing the work. And the intention can be something you're working to heal or something you're working to develop. And healing can mean physical, it can mean emotional, it can mean overcoming patterns, etc. To develop could be things like the courage to speak publicly, the skill to write if you feel like you're going to write a book, so on and so forth. So you can bring things into your frame of reality to support you in moving forward. So sometimes it's a letting go, and sometimes it's an integration of a positive attribute. But you can work with the session. The session is the same energy process, but the response of the template and the energy is to the intention. So the magic of it is you're doing the same mechanical process or the same process of work, but the energetic or the quantum response is connected to the consciousness or the intention of the session in the first place. And so as the sessions began to take shape, I created audios so that a person could be guided through these attunements from the audio experience. And so they're 30-minute audios where you can listen to the sessions and receive the attunements in that form. In 2017, I was guided to develop a practitioner training and to begin initiating people into the sessions to deliver them as practitioners. And so now there's about 100 practitioners, and you guys will be joining this magnificent group, spreading the light and spreading the love. So what will happen through the process of Unity Field is it's like we're connecting through our energetic body to the memory of our own quantum nature, our origins in the divine, if you will. And we're realizing there's a bridge or a channel of energy between our human incarnation and our spiritual origin. And we're activating this energy in the process, working with the template. And so this creates an expanded field of communication to help us go in and mine or recalibrate the energy between the spiritual origin and the current present incarnation. And so it's like we're touching upon a potential that exists within us, and we're bringing that potential down through the axis of DNA and into the human body. And so this is the mystical nature of what is happening in the Unity Field healing work. So if that was not enough, in March of 2019, I was introduced to a group of beings called the Syrian Blue-White Collective. And they came to me in a meditation, and they introduced themselves as a collective of beings from an ascended civilization on Sirius. And they told me that they have been with me and behind the process of the development of the Unity Field healing work. And as people do the attunements, as they listen to the audios, as they receive initiations to be practitioners, as they do their practitioner work for clients, the Syrian Blue-White Collective come to be part of the process. So through the evolution of the work through the weekend, you'll feel them. You'll feel the energy of who they are and what they're all about. It's a really beautiful, magnificent, love-filled radiation. And when they work with us, the energy that they carry, we are facilitating the integration of that into the 3D world, if you will. So we're beginning to work with the Star Brothers and Sisters from other civilizations, which is pretty magnificent when you think about it. They explained to me that they're masters of light and sound and working with quantum geometry to support the transition of quantum structures, including the DNA. And they told me they have served spiritually for thousands and thousands of years, ever since humanity first came to the planet. And they've appeared many times in more and less conscious ways, particularly during the time of Lemuria and pre-dynastic or ancient Egypt. And they're masters of healing and DNA calibration, and they will be present through the sessions. And then they gave a channeled message for Unity Field practitioners. And this is what they said. We introduce ourselves today as the Syrian Blue-White Collective. We are members of what you would term an ascended civilization of beings. We have worked very closely with humanity over the years in many ways, particularly through participation in the DNA quantum matrix. We are what you might term masters of light, geometry, and sound, and work with quantum DNA construction, development, and recalibration. You are each so dearly loved and supported, and you will feel us very near to you as you walk your path and support others in this time of monumental change. Humans' work with quantum DNA is just beginning. You are at the forefront of an awakening process that is galactic in scope. We will work closely with each and every one of you in your healing work as a UFH practitioner. You are stepping out of time and into a quantum level of reality each time you do your healing work. Over the months and years ahead, we will also bring you new information and levels of understanding as you are able to integrate each step in what you are learning and putting into practice. The information around unity field healing and the quantum nature of DNA and reality will evolve. Hence, your knowledge of DNA recalibration, as well as the power of your work and sessions, will also expand with time. Our presence with you now in a more conscious way can be understood as a function of the shifting grids of the energy of the planet. As the energy grids are set and amplified, we are able to strengthen the energy that is incorporated in the healing work of humanity. There is an evolution of energy that follows a natural development in these times of ascension. You have recently crossed a powerful threshold where we are able to work with you more consciously and therefore more powerfully in what you do. The results of the work and effort will feel amplified by this change. Keep planting seeds of light and transformation that will continue to nurture and blossom into a new time. We have termed our beloved Dr. John an ambassador of Syrian consciousness and guardian of the technique. However, he will be the first to tell you there is no one more special or more important in the eyes of the Creator than you. We have chosen him through the attributes of his soul and deep connection with Syrian energy to help anchor this potential in an awakening humanity. However, it is by your soul's Akashic design and connection to us that you have come to learn of this work. We are honored and delighted to begin to work soul to soul in this way. Through the light of the eternal sun, we are the Syrian Blue-White Collective. So this is a very beautiful message that was given to help us understand how they are working with us in this process. In August of 2018, they asked me to begin a series of recorded transmissions. And the transmissions have a theme. Each one is different. And the energy they're given to me in blocks of 3. And so as we work through the transmissions over time, I've come to understand there's an evolution of energy that's part of the transmissions. And they're teaching us about the ascension process step by step through the transmissions. I just want you to know about them. I'm not going to go into detail about them right now, but if people have questions, I'm very happy to answer them. But I want you to know they're available. If this is new information to you, you can go to the Unity Field site. There's a tab called Syrian Blue-White Collective. If you do the drop-down box, you'll see this page. And if you click on it, it will take you to a page where all the transmissions are there. The transmissions are a 3-hour event. There's a 90-minute presentation and then a channeled transmission at the end, the last hour. And so what's recorded and presented here is the last hour. It's the meditative transmission and the channel that they give. And I make those freely available to everybody. If people want to attend the transmissions, you register. You can go to the events page and you register to attend the 3-hour transmission. And so you buy a ticket and then you participate. And I was doing these originally in person, but now they're all going to be done online. And I send out a link to the paid participants for the whole 3-hour transmission now that they're being done in this format, in case you missed it or the time is not a good time for you to do it when it's being done live. So I want you to know they're there because they're very supportive. People are having unbelievable magical experiences with this work and the transmissions. And I see it as an extension of the Unity Field healing process. In one of the transmissions, what they showed was the star mothers of the planet that come together when a new planet is being fertilized, if you will, or developed. So if you imagine at the beginning of the earth before humanity came to the earth, and it was recognized or earmarked to become a potential ascended planet, the mothers who would be part of this evolution gather. And so in the front array, we had the Pleiadian star mothers, for those of you familiar with the Pleiadians and their relationship to Lemuria. But behind them were the mothers of all the star civilizations across the galaxy who've played a role that has culminated in the development of Earth as the next planet of ascension. And what they did at the beginning was they sang into a template that was created. And the template is kind of like the master pattern or the template of energy that would govern the whole civilization. And then, like fractals, each soul is a radiation from this master DNA. And so, whether this is metaphoric or real, they were showing this to me as a way of expressing that we come from a common source and that we all come through this process of an integrated DNA. And so, as we did this in the transmission, the mothers sang into the DNA. And people in the meditation felt the energy coming down through the DNA axis as the mothers sang through it in this format. It was a very powerful thing. But it ties into unity field healing because this is the 24th chromosome. It's the part of energy where the soul's memory is stored. And this connects to your human incarnation. And the channel of energy between you and this molecule or this quantum molecule is the bridge that's being developed as we move forward in the ascension journey. So you begin to see how it all ties together. In the talk, Cryon said that he validated the Syrian support of the work. And as I mentioned earlier, he gave me my Lemurian name, Eli, as a descendant of a Lemurian mother who worked in the Temple of Rejuvenation. And he highlighted to me that what is important to begin to consider is the higher self link. And so as he was saying that, he was giving little stories or parables of energy. He said, the teacher John is on schedule. What I mean is that he's a Lemurian and a medical doctor. He knows what a helix looks like. And this is the beginning. He has visions. They're hidden in certain names, the best he can give, but they all have to do with unity. He sees the grand plan. He sees DNA connected beyond ways of the past where people saw a connection and sees fields that no one has seen yet. He starts to see what might be inside the DNA strands, and it will one day be discovered by science. I'll tell you something else. The help from the Syrians is real. These grandparents that would come in now and start to review the textbooks of Lemuria. You had a vision, you explained you weren't certain how it played out, but you drew it, and you showed it to us, and it was faceless figures that seemed to meet around a table. It's a metaphor for cellular coherence, a meeting of the DNA. It's part of the unity, the field around the DNA. It's critical. It is a multidimensionality, one that cannot be measured except in experiments that measure what DNA is doing with other things. And so you can see I explained some of those to you before. And then he said there's a field, a small field around every DNA molecule, trillions of them, and they overlap. This is the way they can communicate instantly together. You are one being, and consciousness is part of the DNA. It is not in your brain, dear ones. It is everywhere. The field around the molecule contains something very special. Where do you think the sacredness of your higher self resides? It is not in the double helix or the pineal gland. That's an instrument of reception. Your higher self talks to the field around the DNA molecule, and you receive it through intuition. Intuition comes from the sacred part of you, which is your higher self. I'll tell you that golden lining around every single molecule of DNA is multidimensional. It is where your higher self is located. That field, doctor, is something you will see. And as Cryon said those words, this is what I was being shown. This field that looked like the Sri Yantra, the interlocking triangles of golden light radiating these beautiful, beautiful rays of golden light. And then he said, spontaneous remission is a confluence where the fields around the molecules of DNA change instantly. And this causes chemical reactions and stem cell release. All of that right from the DNA. So we begin to see that this field exists around every single aspect of our DNA in a quantum way. And when we're going into the space of unity field healing, we're touching this higher self energy. It's like we're drawing the energy into the axis of the DNA system. And so that's what I was understanding from the visions. And then he said, notice that the presence of the higher self is removed from the past lives. It is outside the molecule, the 24th chromosome. It has to be. It's the place where you say, where a multidimensional sacred soul energy resides in you. It is part of the DNA field. And the field is not to be confused with the other world called the field, around the potential of everything and around humanity. This is your own body-wide system of multidimensionality. So it's different than the field. It's the DNA field. And so we begin to bring all the pictures together. You can kind of see your dad and your mom come together. You get a pool of chromosomes that's a mixture of chromosomes from both your parents. Your higher self is around your 24th chromosome. One incarnation is active that's based on what your soul put together for you when you were born. This field of information encasing the DNA is feeding new energy and new information, and it's present with you in your physical body in this way. And so this higher self energy is beginning to shine down through the system, to radiate into the system. And this is what is integrating the Merkaba into the human energy field. And so you can see how the higher self link, the 24th chromosome, this is around the chromosome. Your higher self is present in every incarnation. The information of all your incarnations is stored in your 24th chromosome. You're present as one incarnation from your parents, but the field of your higher self is around you. And so you have access to the energy of the fullness of yourself as a spiritual entity, not just the form you're in. And it's this access, this energy, that is driving healing. So we're literally bringing this energy down through the axis of our quantum DNA nature and into the field around our own cells and molecules and the totality of our physical being. And so this is the understanding of what you're doing in unity field healing. And the magic of it is nobody needs to be a genius to do it. It's a very natural process. You just have to step into a trust and an understanding of the energy and allow it to unfold through you as you do the work. So that is the end of this evening's presentation. So we're going to take, we'll close down there and we'll take a few minutes here just to let people ask questions. If there's any comments or questions that people want to share, I'll close down the presentation. I'll come back online and we'll be together in a group. And if people have questions, they can enter them into the question and answer chat box and we will take a look at them one at a time. Okay?